Hi, I'm Bill Gaines, the host of the Outdoor View, and today I have the pleasure of having with me Sam Paredes, Executive Director of the Gun Owners of California. Sam, good morning to you. How are you doing today?
Hey, Bill, I'm doing just great. It's a pleasure to be here with you to talk about some important things. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, no, thank you for joining us. Sam, I- well, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little about your organization.
Well, I'm an old guy. Been around for a long time. I've been working with gun owners as a member of the board of directors or an actual employee since 1980. And so it's been a very, very long time. I've been the executive director for several decades. And we're the oldest pro-gun political action committee in America. Our founder and chairman, Senator H.L. Richardson, who at the time, back in 1974, was a member of the board of directors of the National Rifle Association. And 74 was the first year that legislators in California started to introduce bills to ban the possession of handguns. It was also very soon after the Watergate situation with President Nixon. So both Congress and California created these new political action committee entities with public reporting of campaign finances. So they created these structures, and Senator Richardson said, "Hey, you guys care if I start one of these PACs in California?" And they said, "No, go ahead. Here, use our fundraiser." So in 1974, he worked to establish Gun Owners of California. It was called Target 76, and we were the first. He was so successful at raising money and directing it to its proper use for political action that the NRA soon followed with the Institute for Legislative Action. Now they are the big Mac Daddy on the block now, with many more members than we have in Gun Owners of California. But also that was soon after we realized that we also needed to affect federal races and campaigns and issues and in other states. So we created Gun Owners of America. So we've been around for over 40 years. We do only three things basically. We lobby in the legislature and in the Congress, in the legislatures throughout the country, and along with that, political action, grassroots activities, and getting our members and supporters to lobby themselves. And number two, we work in elections because we know that we don't have to worry so much about what happens in the legislature if the people that are in the legislature are the people that we elected. So we try to identify people who believe like we do, and then we train them on the political aspect and help them to win elections so that when they are in the legislature, they can represent our rights and our views. And oftentimes when we help elect somebody like that, we don't even ask them to use the Second Amendment as one of their campaign legs, as long as we know where they are. In their particular district, there might be education, it might be taxation, it might be rent control, it might be any manner of other things that are the hot button issues that are going to get people to vote for somebody. So we encourage them and train them how to use those issues, because the important thing is to get them into their office so that they can protect our views. So that's some of the old school technology that we use and innovation that we've introduced in politics. And then the final thing that we do, Bill, is that we are very active in the courts. We not only do we file lawsuits, but we support many lawsuits with what are called amicus curiae. Other organizations do all kinds of other cool stuff, training hunters, training shooters, and safety training, and all of those very important things. That's not our wheelhouse. Our wheelhouse is strictly focusing on a no compromise position on the Second Amendment in the halls of the legislature, in elections, and in the courts. So that's kind of the long way around the horn. I've been around doing this for a very long time.
Well, and I'm well aware of that. As you know, Sam, I've had the pleasure and honor of representing a variety of hunting groups for 30 years now, which seems like a long time, is a long time. but you've been doing it a lot longer than I have. And the fact that unless you're hunting with the bow and arrow, I mean, the overwhelming majority of hunters, we need sporting arms if we're going to continue to enjoy, a strong future for our hunting traditions, right? So when it comes to gun control, we're impacted every bit as much as everybody else is out there that cares about the Second Amendment and cares about our right to own and possess firearms. You are my good guy in the legislature when it comes to firearms related issues. I know a lot of people down there that work those issues, but Sam, nobody has the background that you've got. Nobody knows the penal code and the various laws that impact firearms, more than you do. So first of all, thank you for what you do, because whether you just like to shoot guns, collect guns, or you're a hunter that uses guns, I mean, we all owe the gun owners of California and the gun owners of America a huge thank you. So let me start with that for sure. Sam, with the recent very unfortunate shooting in Texas, the gun control debate, of course, it's an election year as well, has just absolutely exploded, not only here in California, where we've got an endless gun control debate, right? But nationwide. And in watching the news, with very few exceptions, the information they're putting out there as a knowledgeable gun owner and someone who knows the laws, especially here in California, where you and I are, where gun control laws are far stricter than just about anywhere else in the nation. It just frustrates me the way they point to guns as being the problem. And we're going to take guns away from people, and that's going to solve all these issues. I want to have an honest discussion with you about what really is the problem, and how do we fix it?
Well, Bill, that's the crux of a truly good and ethical approach to examining how to deal with the issue of criminal misuse of firearms. We call it gun violence because the media thinks that's sexy and they use that term, but it's in reality the criminal misuse of firearms. And until we sit down and take a look at what the real foundational facts are, it's easy to be pulled and swayed by the media's approach to, well, we need more background checks, or we need more waiting periods, or we need more this, or we need more that. It's easy until you understand the foundations. First of all, what the Second Amendment really is: an individual. It doesn't grant, it protects a pre-existing individual right to protection, to keep and bear arms, to protect your family and your home, your travels and your businesses. That's what the Second Amendment is about. Also, to be able to, if called upon by necessity by your government, to stand up with your own guns to defend this country. So first, understanding that. Next, understanding that everybody from Janet Reno, former Attorney General for Bill Clinton, President Clinton, all the way to the Center for Disease Control and the National Science Foundation and Professors Kleck and others have all studied and given incontrovertible evidence that somewhere between 1.5 and 3 million times a year, law-abiding citizens use firearms to successfully defend themselves. And the vast majority of them, we're talking 99+% of them, the mere fact that a gun was there kept them, made them a survivor and not a victim. They didn't even have to shoot the gun in order to protect themselves, but the fact that it was there. Now, we also have to take a look at the fact that on an annual basis, over the last 5 or 6 years, it's approximately 16,000 criminal homicides that occur every year. the media and the anti-gunners want to make it seem like it's, you know, twice as many, 30 some thousand, or hundreds of thousands or millions and stuff. But the fact of the matter is that the total number of people that die in any given year with a handgun is about 36,000, and more than half of that are suicides. So all of the laws that you want to pass to control guns will not prevent people who are hell-bent on suicide from committing the act. And that isn't a criminal act against another person. So if we limit it just to those who criminally misuse guns and have a murder victim as a result of that, we're looking at approximately 16,000. So you're looking at 16,000 here versus 3 million over here. The anti-gunners, the left, would be okay with these 3 million. I'll use the conservative 1.5 million people, and it's a different 1.5 million people every year, that they are okay to make it more difficult for them to get guns to protect themselves, or to prevent them from acquiring the firearms they need to protect themselves. By fact and definition, that means that out of these 1.5 million, you're going to create a lot more actual victims, because the anti-gunners prevented their ability to defend themselves. So that number of 16,000 or so homicides will grow exponentially when you have, when you prevent 1.5 million people from protecting themselves. That's where you start. Then you talk about um, Uvalde. The shooter broke every law that you can possibly break in order to commit that heinous act. So what makes us think that heaping more laws would have prevented him or will prevent a shooter in the future when they don't obey the laws in the first place? The fact of the matter is that all of the laws, the gun control laws that are put on the books, only affect people like you and me, law-abiding citizens, the people who, even when we don't like the laws, we obey the laws, and we might work to change the laws, but we don't break the laws. So they only affect you and me, who will never, ever, ever commit any sort of a crime with a firearm. So we are, in essence, by our policies and the focus on controlling guns, we are facilitating the criminal misuse of firearms by people that are either mentally affected or just plain flat out criminally affected, until we spend some time trying to figure out what is it about society that is allowing for people to slip through the cracks and jump to that point where they're willing to commit a heinous act. Is it the glorification of the killing culture in things like video games um, and movies that glorify anti-heroes who use guns that shoot endless numbers of bullets and kill endless number of people with no consequences? And then one of the final and probably the most important thing, Bill, is that our government leaders are reducing, in some cases eliminating, the consequences that people face when they are caught for doing these types of evil, bad things. In California, we are letting people out of prison early. Doesn't matter if they had violent crimes they committed. The sentences are being reduced so that when they're convicted, they are at the beginning are facing a shorter prison sentence. And that's there's no consequence to somebody involved in a gang or a criminal act or something like that. Okay, I shoot somebody, I kill the other guy, I'm going to go to prison for 2-3 years. Man, I'll learn my trade a little bit better, I'll get out on good behavior, and out I go. No big deal. um, there's no deterrence. There's and Bill, when you understand that 50% of the people that come out of the prison system in California will be back in prison within a year. recidivists committing the same type of crime that is significant enough for them to be brought back to prison. Felonies, violence, shootings, stabbings, all of these things. So if we want to reduce crime rates in California, we can start out by keeping people who we know are going to commit a crime again incarcerated for a longer period of time. The people that we face in the legislature on the other side, they don't believe that it's these people's fault that they've committed an act of violence. It's not their fault. It's the fault of the education system. It's a fault of the access to firearms. It's a fault, of some external factor that led them to a life of crime. And you and I know that that's a load of sheep dip, that people of all stripes and colors, races, creeds, whatever you want to go, could make that decision to be either a good citizen or to not be a good citizen. That's a conscious decision that they make. Bill, we have to sit down and agree on some facts. Once we agree on facts, then we can have an honest discussion about how to deal with the facts. But as long as we don't even agree on proven black and white facts, reports that are generated by the federal government, they're required to do it and they do, and you don't want to even agree on those facts, then this becomes a match of wills to see who will organize better than the other in order to win from their policy perspective. I hope that's been like that for a long time. I hope that calmer minds will prevail. I think we're seeing some of that, where people are saying, we've got all these laws. Why are we still having these shootings? Why is this still happening? Maybe it's not the types of laws that we have that will stop this. So what is it? And maybe they will hold our elected officials' feet to the fire and make them study the difficult decisions they have to do about the human aspect. So as long as we have gun control, we will have crime. If we do crime control, we will reduce crime. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, no, you definitely hit on some things that I certainly agree with. If you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns, right? I mean, you've heard that 1,000 times, but no truer words were ever spoken. The 1.5 to 3 million people that saved their life and perhaps the lives of others as well, because either they were armed and people knew that, or the criminal knew that, or that they actually took care of the criminal before the criminal could do the deed that he wanted to. But it's interesting. You don't see those stories on the news. It was just a couple of days after, the tragedy in Texas, that there was a gal back on the East Coast. You probably saw this story, I'm sure, where there was somebody at this public place that went into that place planning on killing as many people as they could. This gal was a legal, law-abiding person with a concealed carry permit, and she took care of that assailant before he could even touch off a single round. Sam, not even a whisper about that, right? So it really makes you wonder when you look at media coverage. I mean, why aren't they talking about that's newsworthy in my mind? There could have been 30 people killed in that shooting. We'll never know, right? Fact is, nobody was killed because a law-abiding gun owner who was carrying a gun legally at the time put the stop to it. It's just totally counterintuitive to me why we think we can stop gun violence by taking away guns, because the only people that are going to give up their guns are the law-abiding citizens. You mentioned, the other things that we should be looking at, to try to cut gun violence. Let's dive into that a little bit. I'm easy on crime laws. Here in California, I mean, our state legislature is going crazy on lightening sentences, shortening probation periods, all of those things to get people out of prisons and back on the street. And it's the same lawmakers that are doing that are doing all they can to take away guns from law-abiding citizens when they're putting those that have already demonstrated that they want to illegally use guns to do harm back on the street. I just don't understand that. It just doesn't make sense.
As long as there are no consequences for bad behavior, there will be bad behavior. Bottom line.
You've got people that have demonstrated bad behavior and they're still putting them out there on the streets.
Right.
So what can you expect? You can expect exactly what's happening when it comes to illegal gun violence, right? Well, let's talk about another factor that you mentioned, mental health. Let's use the Texas massacre again as an example. There were warning signs for a long time. The parents saw them, the school saw them. I mean, this kid was screaming for some type of help.
Yeah.
Nobody did anything to try to intervene, just with his own sanity before he got to the point where he was able to do the damage that he did. I mean, are there any steps being taken to take a look at the real mental health aspect in illegal gun violence?
Bill, that takes too much work for our policymakers. In every one of the cases that have been a young person, even the old people, there's a trail of signs that should have been followed by somebody. That takes work. It doesn't take work to sponsor gun control laws. There's no effort required to do that.
You know, it's interesting because there arguably are no more illegal guns on the street now than there were 40, 50 years ago. So what has changed? We didn't have gun control zones back in those days. We had very few. You mentioned earlier, back it was mid 70s before California state legislature started diving into gun control, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We had plenty of guns on the street before them, right? There was no need for gun control. You look at it now and what's changed, it's like, okay, I mean, mental health has got to be part of it. Are these gun-free zones really, having the impact, or are they having the opposite impact that we want them to have? Yeah. Another thing that strikes me as something that's definitely changed, you mentioned it earlier, Sam, is this video games. These video games that are out here now, you win the game by killing the most people. It's like, is that what we're training our kids, to think that's okay? I think you used the term desensitize them. It does, but I've seen no efforts, or no real efforts to take meaningful steps towards getting our arms around mental health issues. I've seen zero efforts on trying to take a hard look at these video games, what impact they may or may not having, and trying to do some type of control on what's out there on the streets when it comes to those types of things. Seems like there's so many other factors that should be looked at that aren't being looked at because they just want to go straight to gun control. It's almost like every time there's a shooting, it's an opportunity to push for more gun control when it's not gun control that we need, it's people control.
You're right, Bill. This is a conversation that needs to be open because even in dealing with things like video games and education, we have other constitutional rights that come into play. First and foremost, the First Amendment, the right of freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to assemble, all of these aspects of these rights that we have. But there's something about our culture that has made a turn, as you mentioned, back in your day and my day before you. There was very little of this. You're aware that the United States Supreme Court is about ready to come out with a decision that could impact gun rights nationwide. Although it is a case from New York that has to deal with concealed carry weapons permits, it could carry and have an impact on the CCW system we have in California. But more importantly, the court may take this as an opportunity to direct lower courts as to how they handle all Second Amendment legal challenges from now on. And if they do that, that means that many of the laws that we have on the books in California and throughout the country may come falling down. So if a lot of the gun control laws disappear, what are we going to talk about? Maybe we'll talk about something that could really affect criminal misuse of firearms. So that's a hope and a prayer.
Sam, gun control advocates are pushing hard for the control of ARs and AKs, assault type rifles, right? I mean, so their argument is, why do we need those? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's just a great question. And again, it's one of those questions where we have to sit down and look at the verifiable truths about these firearms. In America, the AR and very close behind the AK platform of rifles and handguns are the single most popular guns being purchased by law-abiding citizens in every state. And why is that? It's not because they do as depicted in the movies or in video games that they're machine guns, you pull the trigger and a 30 rounds come out in 1.5 seconds or something like that. That's not it. The reason that people like them is, number one, we have a couple of generations of our citizens that we sent off to war in Iran for the Gulf War, and then Afghanistan and Iran again, or Iraq, I mean. And these generations, multiple generations of warfighters, men and women, trained to use the AR in military configurations. What happens is, throughout history, every time our warfighters came back to the United States, whatever platform they used in their military activities, that's what they were used to. That's what they wanted to use for domestic use. Maybe not in full automatic, but in a semi-automatic. That was true after World War One, when people wanted bolt action Springfields. After World War II, when people wanted M1 Garands. Some people pronounce them Garans. In 30-06, the single most popular hunting caliber in centerfire rifle out there. And the same is true when our warfighters went off. And we're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of people who went and came back, and they wanted that kind of a platform. Well, why did they want that platform? And it is the reason that it is now the single most popular platform. It's easy for anyone of any stature to use, from your 80-year-old grandma with arthritis in their hands to your, college graduate weightlifter. It is the easiest platform to operate, simple to use, very accurate, and easy to control the recoil. So everybody says, if you give them a chance to shoot a handgun, boom, 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 and then you give them an opportunity to shoot an AR, boom, boom, they go, oh my goodness, this is so easy to use. Why wouldn't I choose this to defend myself in my own home? So it's as simple as that. It's become an extremely popular hunting platform. All manner of hunting cartridges are now fitted into the AR platform. Cartridges that we would have never thought would go into a semi-automatic AR style platform, but they are up to 308s and beyond. And the other side would prefer that those people who use guns to defend themselves use a gun that's harder to use, not as accurate, and not as capable of performing as desired. They want people to be handicapped by definition, wanting people to use handguns and shotguns even to defend themselves, as opposed to this platform of a very mildly powered cartridge. The 223 or 5.56 is basically right around the upper edges of some of the more powerful handgun cartridges. So when people say, oh, these high-powered guns, no, you and I know what a high-powered gun is. A gun that can take down an elk or a bear or a deer at long distance. And the 223 is basically banned almost completely across the country for being used for hunting purposes, because it doesn't have It's insufficiently powered. So this is what it is. Again, that's one of the facts that we have to agree on, that this isn't this hyper powered, wunder bullet or anything like that. And people have to be given their choice as to what they believe they want and need to protect themselves. People are making that rational decision. They're going out to gun stores at record labels. Almost 20 million new guns sold since the beginning of the pandemic. Most of them to people who have never owned a gun in America. A bunch of them here in California. A bunch of them are choosing the AR rifle, but they're getting to go to these gun stores that have ranges so they can test fire revolvers and semi-automatic handguns and shotguns and ARs. And I can't tell you how many of them are coming back and saying, I need that AR. It is easy for me to use. It's easy for my wife to use. It's easy for me to train my kids in the event that they have to protect our home than it is a handgun of any type. And when you look at the reality that of all of the crimes that are committed in America, you're looking at 1.2% or less that are committed with a AR style or an AK style rifle. That means they're being committed with something else. But are we seeing any focus on something else, handguns or shotgun? No.
You mentioned that the media mischaracterizes, what they can and cannot do. I mean, AR-15, that's the firearm that was used in the recent Texas shooting, right? Some of the stuff you hear on the news or you see on social media is these things are capable of shooting X number of hundreds of rounds a second, da, 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 da. It's a semi-automatic, Sam. I mean, it only shoots once for every time you pull the trigger. I mean, you can't pull the trigger 50 times in a second. I mean, it's limited just by the human's ability to pull the trigger.
That's
right?
correct.
And how many rounds you've got in the clip. So,
yeah, your average outside of California, your average AR has 20 or 30 rounds, and it's going to take not 1 second, but a significant amount of time to shoot that many rounds. And it's right. That means that, folks, semi-automatic means you pull the trigger, goes boom, pull the trigger, goes boom, pull the trigger, goes boom. What the media wants you to think is that you pull the trigger and it keeps shooting. Boom, 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 boom. That is an outright bald-faced lie. That is not what we are talking about. All of those guns are already controlled by the National Firearms Act of 1934. Right. That's already covered. We are talking about, if you were to take a revolver, you'd go boom, 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 semi-automatic pistol, boom, 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 AR-15, AK-47, boom, 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 same thing. So any amount of damage that can be committed, which is no matter what level is too much, with an AR can be committed with a pistol of any caliber. There's no difference. So it's a debate that needs to be unclouded so that the truth can be at the table in order to have that conversation. And frankly, you have several generations of people that have come back after serving this country bravely and valiantly, who are never going to give up their ARs. They are the ones that they use for protection, for hunting, for recreation, for competitive target shooting. That's the platform that they choose of all kind, and it is capable of fitting those needs. One gun can be modified to fit all of those needs. No wonder people like them.
The typical person out there on the streets, that's watching the regular news, and they're thinking these AR-15s and these AK-47s, these are new guns that are out there now. They've been around for decades. I mean, the AR-15 was what, like 1965 or something like that? It's been around forever.
Yeah, it was the Armalite rifle. That's what AR stands for, not assault rifle like the media would like you to think. Was designed by Gene Stoner back in the early 60s, and originally sold to the general public as a practical rifle for a variety of purposes. It wasn't until a couple of years later that the military realized that this was something that they could adopt, that had some benefits that would make it a practical useful gun for them. So yeah, you're right. We we watch these Arnold Schwarzenegger movies where when a Mac 10 rolls down the staircase shooting, full auto with nobody pulling the trigger. Just that's a whole lot of movie magic that just is an impossible thing to occur. At some point, we have to sit down and seriously discuss facts, and then once we agree on what the facts are, then we can have an honest conversation of how to deal with the misuse of firearms.
Sam, one of the other things that I see the media hype on all the time that I just has me scratching my head is that gun-free zones save lives. Personally, I'm a big advocate for allowing teachers to carry if they want to carry, right? I mean, I've got my CCW. I know you do. I mean, they don't just hand those things out like a candy bar, right? I mean, you've got to, go through testing. You've got to show that you're proficient. I mean, not only with firearms, but with the firearm that you're carrying, that exact firearm that you're carrying, right? I mean,
Right.
So if somebody's gone through the effort to get a CCW, you can rest assured that they are a law-abiding, educated, skilled gun owner, right? And skilled with the gun that they're carrying. Back to the teachers, if a teacher wants to do that, not all teachers should have to, but I know we don't want people carrying that don't want to carry. That's the last thing we want, right?
Right.
But getting rid of the gun-free zones and allowing teachers to carry if they want to, I promise you that step alone would have a major impact on cutting way back on these shootings that are happening in our schools.
Bill, I agree with you 100%. Nobody should be required to exercise a constitutional right if they don't want to. That's why it's a right. You choose to use it when you want to and how you want to, as long as it's lawful use, whether it's guns or speech or whatever. And by advertising these gun-free zones, just based on evaluating all of the most recent of the media sensationalized mass shootings, you are educating the people who have made that mental leap that they're willing to commit a mass murder scenario. You are educating them as to where they can go for a target-rich environment where they are pretty well secure that they're not going to face much opposition for a significant period of time. They want to go in to be able to inflict as much damage as they possibly could. Where do they go? Gun-free zones, because they know no one is carrying. The law-abiding aren't in their carrying. And Bill, that's not a difficult concept for people to understand, but it is. Our policymakers and our the media will not make that logical leap that if we continue to advertise these places as gun-free zones, this is where the shootings are going to happen. Guess what? This is where the shootings are happening. So we need to reconsider that entire policy direction.
If someone were to take a look at where the last X number of mass shootings have occurred, the overwhelming majority of them are in gun-free zones.
That's correct.
What does that tell you? It tells you that promoting these gun-free zones is having as a safe place, if you will, is having the exact opposite effect. Nobody, no, I don't care if you're the staunchest Second Amendment advocate or the staunchest Second Amendment opponent, nobody wants to see people killed like we saw in Texas last week or in Buffalo a few weeks before that. Nobody wants that. Gun owners hate that as much as anybody does. Mm-hmm. Let's find a way to sit down and just talk, have an honest discussion about what's wrong out there and how can we work together to fix it.
Bill, gun-free zones do not cause mass shootings, but there's a correlation. So why don't we sit down and evaluate that correlation? Correlation isn't causation. That's an issue that takes a whole lot more effort to study and to figure out. Um, and so that's where we are. That's what we've been talking about doing since 1975 when we were created. A committee dedicated to crime control, not gun control.
Well, and same thing with, we talked about, the easy on crime laws. Let's have an honest discussion about what type of a correlation, is there a correlation between that and more illegal gun violence, or is there not? And if there is, how do we address that? Mental health, right? I mean, is there a correlation between that, and illegal firearm violence? And if there is, let's deal with that. We're never, guns in a lot of ways, illegal guns are like illegal drugs. We're never going to get them off the streets. They've been out there for decades. They'll be out there decades from now.
Bill, the bottom line is this. Senator H.L. Richardson, when he served in California State Senate for 22 years, every year he would go and interview prison inmates. And he asked every one of them the same question. If I dropped you into any town, blindfolded into any town, any community in the state of California, or for that matter, anywhere, how long would it take you to access a firearm and ammunition? The average response was 45 minutes. Said, you drop me anywhere, I know where to go find a gun and ammunition. And they do, by illegal means. So all of these laws that only affect law-abiding citizens still don't affect the criminals, because they know how to get black market guns. They admit, we want to make it as hard as possible for anybody to avail themselves of firearms in California. That's what we're facing. It's an entrenched, visceral hate for guns and the Second Amendment, and in a lot of ways, hate for those of us who fight for the restoration and preservation, protection of the Second Amendment, Bill.
Right. Well, Sam, thank you for what you're doing and for what gun owners of California and gun owners of America are doing to maintain our Second Amendment rights. Bill, all law-abiding Americans owe you guys a lot of gratitude. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Bill. It's an honor and a pleasure, number one. Number two, thank you for developing this program and this channel, and for spreading the word, because we're busy fighting in the trenches, and if not for people like yourself who take it upon themselves to spread the word, to let people know, the information stays too close. So you're kind of shedding light on in dark places that is very important. So as partners, I look forward to working with you in the future.
No, I appreciate that, Sam. And we have to get accurate information out there as to what's causing these incidences and how we as a society can get our arms around those. And just trying to promote a gun control debate as the only answer is just, it's just wrong. It's dangerous, and it's costing us lives. It's like, let's move on and let's figure out to working together on how we can get our arms around this and stop this problem. Well, Sam, thank you so much for all you do. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in today to The Outdoor View, a place where we educate, connect, and learn to protect our outdoor traditions. Check us out on Facebook and on YouTube as well, and on our website, www.theoutdoorview.org.